Have you ever wondered what would happen if the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen was, well, completely empty on the inside? Today, we're going to dive into a story that asks exactly that. This is The Sculptor and the Soul. So, let's start with this question right here. What is the real difference between the beauty you can see, the kind that literally stops you in your tracks, and the beauty you can feel, the beauty of a person's soul? Our whole story today revolves around that very question. Okay, so let's meet our main character, Alfred. He's this brilliant young sculptor, just back from Italy, and he's a huge success. But he's on a mission, a very specific one. He's searching for the perfect subject, the living, breathing embodiment of physical perfection. And wouldn't you know it, at a party thrown for him, he thinks he's found her. He gets introduced to an elderly widow and her daughter, Kaela, who is just breathtaking. And the mother, she's, let's just say, very eager to make a good impression. This first meeting, it gives us a pretty big hint about the mother's, let's call it a unique way of seeing the world. Alfred is describing a plaza in Rome with this ancient obelisk, and she just blurts out, "An organist." Yeah, you heard that right. Alfred is pretty stunned, but honestly, he barely even notices. His attention is already 100% focused somewhere else. Because, he's not there to chat with the mom. He is completely, utterly captivated by her daughter, Kaela. She's quiet, she's graceful, and in her perfect, silent beauty, Alfred just projects this whole world of depth and meaning onto her. He's so infatuated that he's willing to ignore some pretty major red flags coming from her mother. Like, at one point, he shows off this dramatic sketch he made of a volcano erupting, and she looks at this black and white drawing and asks, "Did you see it throw up white fire?" But Alfred, he's just blinded by Kaela's beauty, so he smiles and lets it slide. And all of this sets up the story's central metaphor, the gilded casket. A stunning, ornate, beautiful box on the outside. But what's actually inside? Is there a treasure in there, or is it just empty? That's the one question Alfred isn't even thinking about asking. So instead, he just dives right in, head first. Alfred and Kaela get engaged. He truly believes he's found his living masterpiece, his work of art. It's so fitting that at their wedding, someone sings a song about Pygmalion loved his Galatea, the old myth about the sculptor who falls in love with his own beautiful statue. But right here, this is where the story hits us with a huge warning. It says, he had looked at the casket without caring to inquire what it contained. And that omission often brings the greatest unhappiness into married life. You just know that fairy tale is about to come crashing down. And oh boy, does it unravel fast. As you can see here, what kicks off as this happy engagement very quickly sours into an empty marriage. The real breaking point, though, is a trip to Italy. What should be an artist's dream trip turns into a total nightmare, and it just reveals the massive, gaping chasm between them. So why was Italy so awful for them? Well, this pretty much says it all. The complaints from Kaela and her mother are just, wow. The travel was tiring, it cost too much, there were way too many art galleries, they got bored of all the endless Madonnas, and they thought the food was miserable stuff. Can you imagine how soul-crushing that must have been for an artist like Alfred? Right around this time, a new person comes into their lives. Sophy, one of Kaela's friends. Now, Sophy isn't a classic beauty. In fact, we learn that Kaela would sometimes tease her for being a little crooked. But her presence in their home just completely changes the entire atmosphere. And the contrast between the two could not be more clear. On one side, you got Kaela, the casket. A perfect doll, beautiful on the outside, but fragile and silent. On the other side, you got Sophy, the treasure. Valued not for her appearance, but for her brilliant mind, her generous heart, and her faithful spirit. And then, tragically, Kaela's health starts to fail. She gets sick, and she passes away. As the story puts it, when the casket is everything, it really ought to be strong. But Kaela's was fragile. And now, it's broken. Even in her grief, the mother's perspective hasn't changed one bit. Her final words on her daughter are so telling. A beauty ought to be perfect, and Kaela was a perfect beauty. Her focus is still and only on that flawless exterior. After some time passes, Alfred's view on life and on beauty starts to really shift. He finds true companionship, not in a perfect form, but in a kindred spirit. He marries Sophy. And you can just see how much he's changed in what he says. He reflects, I once fell in love with a beautiful statue, but the kindred soul, a gift from heaven, I have not found and won till now. He finally gets it. What he truly needed all along was a connection of the mind and spirit. But looking back on that first marriage, he comes to a pretty harsh conclusion. He tells Sophy that in the afterlife, he and Kaela will just be mere acquaintances, because their souls had absolutely nothing in common to connect them. But Sophy, the treasure, she's not going to let that stand. She offers a vision that is so much more profound, so much more compassionate. She gently corrects him. She says, that was not a loving speech. In a future state, her soul will acquire such completeness that it may harmonize with yours. And then comes this incredible conclusion, and you will then once more utter your first rapturous exclamation of your love, beautiful, most beautiful. Sophy's idea is just breathtaking. She believes beauty of the soul isn't some fixed thing. It can grow, it can evolve, and it can become complete, even after we're gone. It's this amazing vision of redemption, not judgment. So the story leaves us right here with this final question. Where do we find what is most beautiful? Is it in the physical form that will always eventually fade? Or is it in the soul, which has this infinite, incredible power to grow?